Ken. I am here today interviewing Ken Phillips, who is the Executive Director of Self-Employed Australia, and he has been in the news a lot recently around the WorkSafe case going against the Victorian Government. So, Ken, introduce yourself, a little bit about SEA and what you do.
We've been around 21 years, which I suddenly go, ouch. So we were formed, I'm a small business person. All the people involved are small business people. We're a volunteer organisation. Like all volunteer organisations, you know, we operate on the smell of an oily rag, but we have a membership base and people join us and they like the things that we do. And we're dedicated essentially to filling a space where we're looking to get regulations more appropriate for small business.
So basically you're a non-for-profit that advocates for small business policy changes, regulations, that sort of thing.
All that very long-term boring space. And it's normal for people not to see the connection between what we do and the outcomes and how it affects their own business. But for example, I think it would be well recognised if we hadn't campaigned for the unfair contract laws, they would not now be in place and they would not now be in the process of being beefed up. So we started the campaign. It took us 7 years to get the laws.
That's a long time.
We're not a fly-by-night. We know where we're going and we know what we need to do. And I'm up in Canberra next week, walking the halls of Parliament House, handing out flyers to anyone that I walk past to say, look, we want to see reform to the ATO, because the ATO treats small businesses appallingly. And we've got lots of people that we have dealt with and still continue to help who have been in long battles with the ATO. So we've got a principle on that one, for example, that it's all about collecting the correct amount of tax, not the amount of tax that the ATO can leverage out of people. So we get pretty upset about the treatment that happens to small business people, and what you have to do is something practical about it and get the policy changed, the legislation changed. We've also been very heavily involved in the campaign for pay on time laws. Now they're now coming in, and I'd have to say, having been in business myself for 30 years, that the biggest single issue in front of small business people is getting their money in on time. And so what we're doing is we're involved in doing very practical things to get very practical outcomes, but those sorts of things, you've got to take a long-term perspective, you've got to drive at it for a long time, you've got to be very damn patient, and in the process also try to earn an income somehow, which is rather handy. You need an income.
Yeah, and as a non-profit, that's typically one of the biggest challenges that you face, when you don't work for money, making sure that you have some to live off is always the hardest part. So that's been really good. So obviously you've been doing this for quite some time. This is not your first rodeo.
No.
And so the thing that you're in the news about at the moment that everyone's really interested in, which I will say is on your website under the Not Above the Law section. So everything that you have done is very transparent. You're very open about it. But basically you sent a legal letter to WorkSafe in September last year requesting an investigation into the Victorian Government.
So the provision that's available, so clearly the background, we had COVID breakout of the hotel quarantine sites. That spread through the community rapidly. The government was not able to manage or control that. It resulted in 801 deaths in Victoria. And under any circumstances, that if this had been a private sector organisation where this has occurred, the WorkSafe would have been down their throats within days.
Yeah, so you've basically done what a lot of the public was saying should have been done last year and applied what would, in a typical workplace, be completely unacceptable behaviour or standards, and said this can still be applied and triggered the legal aspect of WorkSafe to launch an investigation. So that was back in September.
So the legal trigger here is that under the Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, so just so people understand, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is about work and WorkSafe, but if you're walking past a work site and a crane falls over and kills you, the responsible party, the company building the building, is responsible for your safety and will be prosecuted accordingly.
Yeah.
So work safety laws just don't apply to workers or employees on sites. They apply to you and me, given the consequences of the behaviours of the people who are in control of the site.
Yep, which makes sense.
Yeah, so these work sites were the quarantine sites.
Mm-hmm.
The government has admitted and clearly were in control of those work sites. The virus broke out from those work sites, and under the Act, they must be prosecuted. There's no question of it.
No. And a couple of things I do want to flag here, just because you do get some opposition in response to comments like this, you know, such as it's broken out other hotel quarantines, it's done things like that. I would just bring the point that what happened in Victoria and the consequences of this were unmatched in any other state. And on the part of your website that you do have a couple of key facts that you found the Victorian Government was trying to use as a defence, but you are claiming in your actions that are completely false. So the idea that work safety laws would not apply in this situation, you're claiming that that's not true, that their claims the pandemic was not unprecedented.
Well, so they would say, I'm not a lawyer,
yeah,
but I have a team of lawyers who educate me and make me behave properly. And they say to me that they believe that the key defence, or one of the defences that the government will attempt to run, is that this was unprecedented. So we have looked at that. We've got a 4-minute video with me blabbing on the issues with that, and we've got source documentation. Now, I can't remember the exact dates, but the World Health Organization predicted, I think it was from 2008, said we are going to have another large flu pandemic. We don't know what type, we don't know when, but it's coming.
So this is something else as well, the use of the word another, because obviously one of their other defences that they've used in Parliament extensively, that I myself have repeatedly ripped apart online, is this concept of a 1 in 100 year event is completely false. That's not true.
It's just babble.
Yep.
It's complete babble. The
Yep.
World Health Organization said another one is coming. So we had the 2019 flu pandemic that came in just after the war, killed about 2 or 3 million people globally plus. But this one, we knew that it was coming. World Health Organization warned. The Australian government put their pandemic plans together, I think from recollection, in 2014. The Victorian Government, along with the other states, then did their pandemic plans. They do scenarios around these on a consistent basis, what's going to happen and so forth. They knew about the COVID as early as late December 2019. That was consolidated. Then the World Health Organization declared a pandemic from recollection in early January. Then the Australian government put together their pandemic plans. The state government and the Victorian government put together its COVID pandemic plans and announced those from recollection in March 2020. Yep. We've got all of those documents on our website. It's all quite clear. The evidence is quite clear. And unprecedented, of course, this was not unprecedented. This was totally expected. Style, type and when was unknown. But we spend a lot of money on defence forces, hoping that if some foreign power attacks us, we can defend ourselves. Now, a health department, its core function, the core function of a government with a health department is to prepare for war against viruses. This is a primary function. Yep. And there has been in Victoria a complete and total collapse of effectively our army against the flu. Entirely unaccepted.
And, you know, this concept that they wouldn't have a plan in place, you know, also mentioned on that page is the concept that, you know, there wasn't a hotel quarantine plan. The concept that you can have entire infectious disease units exist for years and at no point would anyone have ever thought of this? Personally, for me, I always found that one of the hardest things to believe that people believed was actually true.
Well, if it's true, and the head of the health, or the secretary of the health department at the time, said they did not have a plan for hotel quarantine. So they had a plan for COVID, but no plan for hotel quarantine. Goodness gracious, we bring in animals on a regular basis from overseas who go through quarantine. This is not, what's the difference? This is not something that's unknown. The requirements are quite clearly there. There's a lot of experience around this. What this says to us is that the government was criminally incompetent. That's what this says, because the breaches of the OHS Act are criminal breaches. So they're criminally incompetent, and the result, 801 deaths.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not going to be one to argue against calling this government incompetent, not in any stretch of the imagination. And so what you've essentially done, obviously, this is, as you said, you're not a lawyer. So you going through the content on the website, which is fully available, and I will link, you sent a letter that was obviously written with legal assistance to WorkSafe requesting an investigation. So this is not, just to clarify for people out there, this is not you suing the government. This is not anything like that. You have written a legal letter to WorkSafe requesting that they use the powers that you know that they have in order to launch an investigation into the conduct of the government that has basically resulted in negligence and harm. And I believe you have been getting replies. And so at the moment, we're at the point where WorkSafe has actually confirmed that they are investigating.
Correct, yeah. So the letter that we sent was able to trigger under what's called Section 131 of the Act, which says that after 6 months, if WorkSafe haven't investigated, anyone can ask WorkSafe to undertake an investigation. In that letter, we alleged that there have been 142 breaches of the Act committed by 20 people and 4 government departments. So we've been quite specific. And again, all of that information is on our website. The WorkSafe have confirmed that they've received that letter. There's been quite a lot of correspondence between us, but they had then 3 months to reply to us formally. They have then requested another 3 months of investigation, which they're able to do. That current 3 months finishes at the end of this month. They can then request another extension of time for investigation. And then at the end of June, they must inform us whether they are undertaking prosecutions or not.
Okay, so this is the part that I really kind of wanted to flesh out a little bit. So when it comes to whether or not they undertake prosecutions, right now you have requested they launch an investigation. What happens if they don't? If they
don't, the first thing is that they have to reply to us on each of the 142 allegations that we have made. They can't just write us a letter saying, no, we don't think we're going to prosecute. They are required, according to the lawyers, are required to give us a detailed response on every one of the 142 allegations. Then if they are not prosecuting on any one of those, we can then request that the WorkSafe then refer the matter to the Director of Public Prosecutions for Victoria. And on that request, they must refer it to the Director of Public Prosecutions.
And there are also wider implications to requesting that they investigate this and them choosing not to do so. This obviously also sets a precedent with WorkSafe to not investigate a claimed breach.
So from the Coate inquiry, the government have essentially said and repeatedly said, we don't know how it happened. So if that's the defence that they're going to run, or this was unprecedented, and WorkSafe accept that and do not prosecute, that means that from here on in for every death, for every injury, for every WorkSafe incident that happens from here on in, every lawyer will bring those issues up as a defence, and they will use that as what's happening now as defence for future prosecutions.
So basically,
this means the collapse of the WorkSafe system in Victoria.
Yeah, so basically WorkSafe undermined the entire reason why they exist as an organisation or they go after the government. Those are basically the options they've been left with.
They either destroy the entire work safety system or they prosecute the government.
So not a corner they're probably enjoying being in, but works well for the rest of us.
Well, I don't care about them being in a corner, because every single person in this state deserves to have an environment in which they are safe.
Yep.
And if WorkSafe want to walk away from their responsibility to ensure that that system operates, what we have is WorkSafe and the government putting the entire community at risk, that is health and safety risk, on a permanent, ongoing basis. That is simply not acceptable. No,
and I think the vast majority of people in this state would agree with you. That's a very reasonable stance. Yeah. All you want is for someone to do their job. That's it. And I think the thing that's also worth mentioning in this, you brought this up really briefly before, the coat inquiry, which was pretty much a joke. What is the difference with WorkSafe's powers with the coat inquiry? I understand pretty instinctively off the bat that they have a lot more powers to request or demand certain documentation, but also in comparison to a royal commission.
Well, effectively, as I'm advised.
As you're advised, sorry, yeah.
Right, the WorkSafe authority's powers are beyond that of the police, beyond that of what you would see with a Royal Commission, and way beyond that of the powers of the coat inquiry. There is almost nothing that the WorkSafe authority can't request and require. They can move in on a work site, on a place, and demand records, etc., etc. And then on top of that, they are the prosecuting authority. Our Royal Commission might be able to have powers for thorough investigation that might come close to that of WorkSafe, but then all they do, or all the Royal Commission would do, is write a report. They don't prosecute.
Yep.
So WorkSafe is really a Royal Commission in itself. It has the power effectively of a Royal Commission. There's no holding back from that at all. And their investigations can, and in our view, should lead to prosecutions.
So it's basically a Royal Commission with actual follow through in one.
Correct. Correct.
Yep.
This is absolutely the way to go.
Yep. No, this is fantastic. Now, one question that I get a lot that I feel the need that I have to mention because I get it so often whenever I post about this situation and what's happening is, can Dan retrospectively legislate his way out of this? Now, my public stance on this has been basically not really. The reason why is that WorkSafe legislation in and of itself, you know, unless the only thing I could think of that he could possibly do is put an exempt clause for ministers, but even then it would be so blatantly obvious and so blatantly corrupt in an attempt to escape any kind of consequences. You couldn't do that quietly. And other than actually dismantling the WorkSafe legislation itself, that's really the only thing he could do, and he hasn't done it.
Well, my, again, understanding is that the prosecution stands, or the offence stands, according to what the law was at the time.
Yeah.
And so to put in place legislation that undid this type of law in the past would be, I would strongly suspect, highly challengeable through to the High Court.
Yeah, yeah.
So possibly unconstitutional, but I don't know. I'm speculating.
And I really just wanted to raise it, I guess, as a point that as it currently stands, he's not trying to. This has already eventuated to the point where, as you said, they have to give a statement by the end of this month, and you're looking kind of towards the end of June for more of a final result on what's going to happen. So it's kind of already far enough rolling that to try and do anything would basically just be destabilizing democracy. I can't imagine that would actually be political suicide to try and do something like that. It would just be unthinkably bad for the party. I have no idea how he's going to try and do this, but there is obviously concern in the community with severe trust issues with this government, which are quite founded, and what they would try and do. But I guess, you know, as you've said previously during our discussions, you can only really work with what you've got right now. And right now, for what was in place when you launched the letter, the legislation that was in place and the liabilities that were there, everything is valid. And until that changes, nothing changes. So I think that that's probably the best attitude to have. There is nothing you can do to know the future or anything else like that. So, but I do get that question a lot from people.
Look,
who think,
we're very used, and I'm very used to David and Goliath battles. We're involved in taking on the taxation office.
Yep.
The unfair contract laws, we're up against the big end of town. And what I know is persistence, focus on the truth, and focus on what is the right thing.
Yep.
And I can tell you that we are not going to back off.
I'm getting that impression.
We are here for the long term. I'm very, very pleased with people who've put in some money to assist us. You know, we've had $5, $50, this sort of stuff. It all builds up. We've got a team of lawyers, all sorts of things going on. We're not going away. And I've put on our website a story about a town in Flint in Michigan, USA, where there were a water poisoning situation that happened, I think, in 2016.
Yeah, that was quite big global news. And
12 people died, not 801, 12 people died. It was just, I think, 2 months ago that the prosecutions, criminal prosecutions, were finally launched. This is after, what, about 6 or 7 years. Criminal prosecutions launched against the ex-governor, who's effectively the premier. Senior officials from the health department, the water department, et cetera, they're all up on criminal charges. Now, and part of those charges involved corruption for trying to cover up. So this is a long haul. We're not going away.
No. And I just want to touch on something really briefly that you just said. The charges don't go away if the person is no longer currently in the role. So, for example, Makakos, who has now left government entirely, this does not go away for her just because she's not currently in the role. She was in the role at the time. Is that what you've been led to believe by your lawyers?
If you were driving a car drunk and were up before a magistrate and said, look, I don't drive anymore, the magistrate, I think, would say, on your bike. Cool.
Just to cover that one off as well, I'm just going through a lot of the main questions that I do get. And I will go to probably what is the most important part. So for Self-Employed Australia, how can people support you with that? And then also, how can people support the actual WorkSafe investigation that you are doing and pursuing?
Well, at the end of the day, at this stage, so much of it's about public pressure. And so the number of things, go onto our website and look at our not above the law information. We'll keep people as updated. And as you said, we're as transparent on the whole thing. We put the information about our views and have a look at, educate yourself on it. Then talk to other people, talk to your member of parliament, write to WorkSafe. We've got the address there where you can write to WorkSafe. Express your view and your hope. I say do that politely and professionally, but get the message through. And if you're also inclined to join us, we've got spots on the page where you can join us and contribute to the campaign. Obviously, this thing takes money, and so every $5 that we get in is a huge help. But talk to people. Become aware, become educated. And I think above all, remember that none of us is above the law. And this is why we've called it that. And that there are 801 people who are no longer here because of this. And we must not allow that to be forgotten. But all of those things,
No, that sounds great. I will be putting the details up for how people can support both your organisation in general. I know for a fact that I have a lot of followers who are self-employed, who got very badly burnt by what happened in 2020, particularly the complete lack of support from the government during the lockdown here in Victoria. And then as well, anyone who wants to chip in even $5 towards the cost that you incur for doing this. As you said, you're in this for the long haul. You've demonstrated that you don't have an issue with being in it for the long haul. If you can do something for, pursue the one issue for 7 years, and you've been doing this in total for 21, I can't imagine that the government is under the impression you're just going to drop this for the sake of it. So, but I think that that's great. I think that, one of the reasons I wanted to have this chat was so that people understood exactly what was happening. I think as well, just to hear from yourself that you have a track record of staying on course with things like this. You are very motivated just to see the right thing done. And that's the base of it. It's not about disproportionately attacking, Labor or anything else like that. All you want to see is WorkSafe do their jobs and see the right thing done for Victoria, who suffered as a result of the negligence.
You've got it in one.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this has been helpful for people who have been loosely following this story in the news but have lacked a little bit of context or some of the detail on it. And we will be staying up to date with everything that happens. I look forward to hearing about the update that comes out at the end of this month. And yeah, we'll stay in touch.
Thanks for your time and interest.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken.
Bye.